Scott Knapp is a senior lighting artist from Turtle Rock Studios. He's worked on huge AAA games like Madden NFL from Electronic Arts and huge blockbuster movies like Avengers Infinity War and Batman vs. Superman. This guy knows lighting. It was an absolute pleasure to sit down with him and talk for over an hour, which I've condensed down to about 25 minutes. And if that's too long, you could jump between the different sections. Check out the time codes in the description of this video. At the end of the video, be sure not to miss a summary of all the key takeaways of what Scott taught me. Lastly, I wanted to apologize. The audio is a little out of sync for my questions. His audio is fine, but I did make a mistake, so my voice might be talking without my mouth moving, and I apologize for that. With that being said, please consider giving this video a like. I promise I'll fix it. I will fix it. And if you enjoy videos like this, hit that subscribe button so I can make some more. Thank you, and let's jump into it. A quick message for anybody joining us from the Turtle Rock legal team. Hello, welcome. We're not going to be covering any intellectual property or IP, right? Nothing like that. I'd love to start by asking you how in the world you got started in lighting, which is one of the most niche disciplines within the gaming industry.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always loved art, and I always assumed getting into 3D that I wanted to be a character guy. Like, I was like, oh, characters, that's the hotness. That's what I always wanted to get into. But the part that really intrigued me was the presentation part. Like, right when I finished a character, I really wanted to present it well. And I was like, oh, cool. What makes my character really shine is the lighting and the materials and stuff like that. That really intrigued me. I wanted to learn more about it. So when I was at university, I went to University of Central Florida, a bachelor's degree in like digital media. So it's a little bit broad, but we focused on like a student short film where me and a couple buddies really took into lighting. We were like the only dudes who really were interested in it. Everybody else wanted to do textures or characters or animation, but we all fell in love with lighting, and we kind of tackled lighting for the whole short film that we produced. And after that, like I just kind of went full tilt on it and started like digging up as much tutorials as I could, finding any kind of documentation I could. I was seeing what people in the industry were doing who were really good at lighting. So there's artists like Jeremy Vickery from Pixar who had like fantastic tutorials from Gnomon that he put out. So I dug up as much of that kind of stuff as possible. And just really started reaching out and seeing what other people were doing with lighting. Because it seemed like the thing that was progressing the fastest in the industry as well. Like if you take like Toy Story 2 versus Toy Story 3, for example, like the jump that you see there, a lot of it comes from materials and lighting. And that's like kind of really what intrigued me.
What are sort of the telltale signs of someone who really knows what they're doing?
Being able to see a whole image, seeing the composition, how lighting plays into storytelling and the mood, but also like just like what makes a pretty picture, right? So seeing things almost like you would as a director of photography and film, like every frame matters. And like when you're revealing a corner, if you're coming around, coming through a door, like what do you see as a player? So helping direct that stuff as lighters are very important. A lot of entry-level lighting portfolios, sometimes things might be a little bit too even area. There's too much equal weight in their image. They're not paying a lot of attention to like a hero spot or something like that. As a lighter, you want to direct your player's eye and let them know like where they need to go. Be very clear and deliberate with what you're showing off, right? Especially in games, like you're in full control, so you don't have to worry about like what people in film have to worry about, where it's like, oh, well, it's sunny outside, we have to include these lights and stuff like that. You're in full control, so everything you place needs to be deliberate and for a reason. Advice for new lighters would be, what are you trying to show, why, and like what kind of mood are you trying to evoke from like who's viewing it?
After a prospective lighting artist works on those fundamentals, gets them nailed down, what does the process actually look like for landing the job?
Definitely portfolio for focus just for any kind of art job, for sure. For lighting, it should look photographic and beautiful for sure. Even, I mean, dark stuff's beautiful too, right? Like whatever looks appealing. I would definitely suggest looking at films that have great lighting. Like a lot of David Fincher films are really appealing lighting wise. Roger Deakins films are super appealing. And then looking at games that also have great lighting. So portfolio is definitely king to get you that callback in the first place. But then once you do get a callback, being personable and letting know people that you can be dependable whenever you do get on the job. So if you have that interview, making sure you can be the go-to dude. Like if someone asks you to do something, you need to have your shit together. You need to be able to, deliver, make good estimates, and just do your best and always be hungry, right? Don't get content. I would say the ratio is probably 70% artistic side, 30% implementation. So like having a good eye and knowing like what creates a good image in the first place is super important. Learning tools, hopefully, is something that you can pick up pretty quickly. I've had to learn so many renderers throughout my career. Like I've worked in film and games, and for film, I've used RenderMan, used Arnold, used V-Ray, used Katana, Maya. Like you just learn them as you go along. Usually, it's like 2 or 3 weeks of like pain, and then it gets a little bit better. Things start, you start getting some clarity and stuff. But the artistic fundamentals and stuff is the important part. But I would say having an understanding of what is actually happening for video games and like what happens with real-time lighting and having a relative base understanding of what's going on with rendering and all that kind of stuff is super important. So you need to be technical as well. And that shouldn't scare people off. Just dig in. Unreal is free. Unity is free. I would definitely suggest downloading those. There's a ton of even marketplace assets you can learn from where it's like fully composed scenes and you can like relight them and stuff. Things that will help get your mind wrapped around what the whole pipeline would be for as a lighting artist. But a lot of the fundamentals kind of transfer. So if you're thinking about like light maps, all that kind of stuff, like a lot of that stuff transfers depending what engine you're in, thankfully. So the learning curve's not too bad. How you go about manipulating your lights and like certain, bells and whistles that certain engines might have. That's stuff that hopefully if you have a good rendering engineer, you can kind of like lean on those guys and, hey, it'd be really cool if, we had an area light instead of just a spotlight, or it'd be really cool if we could pipe in a texture into our light instead of just using a single color. Those are the kind of things that, the closer you get with your programmers and the more collaboration you have in your team, and depending on the bandwidth of your project, you can hopefully start pouring in those requests like, hey, I use this in Unreal Engine. We don't have this in our engine. Can we bring that stuff over? So.
What would you say are your favorite interview questions when it comes to an interview with a candidate or maybe a portfolio critique?
That's a good question. A question about questions. Nice. I definitely like to ask like personal work, like what, like if it was a lighting candidate, like what are films that you draw inspiration from? Like what are some of your favorite films lighting wise? What are your favorite games lighting wise? I like to know what people think are kind of like the bar in their opinion. It makes me get perspective, and like I like to know why. It's like if someone's like, I really think Doom is the best. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Doom is pretty cool, but like why? Like, what makes you feel that way? Another question I like to ask, definitely like why would you want to work at our studio, right? Like depending on where I'm at, what's drawing you here? Like you can really tell the people who are passionate about the idea of working for your studio and like they've done their homework on like what kind of games you make and stuff like that. And the ones who are like, oh, well, I mean, you're in the area, so it's kind of convenient. It's like, all right, dude, well, like you're not passionate about this at all,
How important would you say the passion aspect is when it comes to, your day-to-day work?
I think it's very important. Morale is super important, man. And like if you have someone who's just negative and toxic all the time, it spreads, and it could really bring a production down. Like you want people who come to work and are stoked on what they're doing. Even if it's like Barbie Adventure 5, dude, we're gonna make the sickest looking Barbies, dude. They're gonna look so good. This is gonna be the coolest hot pink Corvette. Like people should be excited about coming to work, right? Especially with making games. Dude, we're making video games. It's awesome. You're not like digging ditches and stuff, dude. Like we're super privileged to work in this industry, and people should be excited about it. And if they're jaded about it, I don't want them working with me.
Over time, you've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects. I'm interested in what are the particular lessons or takeaways you may have brought with you from them.
Hard work definitely gets recognized is probably one of the biggest takeaways. People who stay late and stuff and keep their heads down and just grind, they might not be recognized. They might not be the most vocal in the beginning, but long term, they usually get recognized. It's like, whoa, that guy is a hard worker. He's always delivering. So I would always suggest, not saying that everybody's do crazy overtime or anything, but when you're at work hard Don't just, mess around all day. It's good to have fun at work and stuff, but really like, grinding and getting stuff done gets recognized. Going above and beyond and suggesting tools and like, maybe even prototyping stuff. Like I've known guys that I worked with who have gone out and they've found something they want implemented from a tech artist, and they will do the work to figure out what it takes to do that, what departments that might affect, and do like almost a whole write-up of what the tech specs of that would be, and that stuff's super helpful and it gets recognized. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's another really important one. People come in fresh. They might be associate artists or whatever, and they might be a little bit intimidated at first, and they might be like, I don't want to ask questions because I don't want to look dumb. But sitting on a problem that you're not going to be able to solve without help is going to be way more dumb than just asking a question. Another good one, I guess, a third one would just be communication. Like, just don't get in your own little bubble. Don't just sit at your desk and only work. You need to go out and talk to other people in other departments, get to know your team, because communication is super important for games. Be organized, have your shit together, because opening up a messy file is just the worst. So that's definitely a common mistake for newer guys. In feature film, stuff moves a little bit more fast-paced than in video games. Video games, you have a little more development time and stuff like that. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, the hair follicles are in the wrong place, but just select them and delete them, dude. It's fine. It's like, yeah, man, or you could or you just like fix it, because this is probably going to go through iteration again. And that's usually what happens. It's like, oh, we like the way that Thanos' arm came out, but his muscle wasn't flexed right. So it's like, it has to go back through again anyways. Just fix it, dude. So, yeah. Just getting things done properly as best of your ability within the time you have is good, instead of just putting Band-Aids on stuff along the way.
How do you feel that over time, lighting as a discipline has changed during your career within the industry?
I feel like lighting has become a huge tool for storytelling now, where before, at least for video games, more just kind of for visibility, right? Like that, sometimes, there's some standout games from back in the day that like they really try to push that stuff. But for the most part, it's like, oh, light above a door, go there. Like it's like super obvious, and there wasn't, a lot of storytelling or a lot of emotion they're trying to evoke from players. But I think that's shifted quite a bit. Like if you look at games like, Last of Us, especially the new one that's coming out, like the new gameplay footage, it's like you could tell they poured a lot of love into lighting because of how powerful it is, right? How much tension you can build, and how much, like, you get like a little bit of breathing room. We're outside. This is great. There's like a nice sunny day. Oh shit, we got to go into this tunnel. This sucks. Like they're playing with your emotions through light, and I think it's become a very powerful tool with games, and a lot more studios are seeing that and pushing that stuff.
Is there an advice or perhaps a mantra that has stuck with you throughout your career?
Don't get tied to something. Don't get married to something because it's yours. Kind of like even just taking a break from it. So like I'll do that sometimes where it's like I'm lighting a map. I'm like, dude, I don't know how I can make this better. And I'll just switch to a new map because I need to take a break from it. So getting fresh eyes on things and looking at it for real objectively. Like what would a player see? Like when a player sees this, what are they going to think? Not just like, oh, well, I made this decision because of blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, dude, like when someone with fresh eyes sees this, what are they going to think? So I think that's a super valuable tool. It's called developer goggles. So like you've been looking at it, all the puzzles, the layout, you're used to it. It's like playing Dust. Like for Counter-Strike, I can play Dust with my eyes closed. Like I know where to go. I know the timing. I played it so many times.
Everybody else, what could they do to better support your role as a lighting artist?
That's a hard one. Like I mean, at least for me, like I've been super fortunate with my studios where everybody's kind of like the collaboration's so tight. It's really just a time issue. Especially at Turtle Rock, like the people I collaborate with every day, it's like it's so agile, and we're such a small, like scrappy studio. I worked at EA and like other big places where, it's a lot more. Oh, your producer talks to my producer, and then maybe we'll figure something out. But at Turtle Rock, like I'll just walk over to a dude's desk and I'm like, hey man, like, what do you think about this idea? And like either he's like, yeah, that's kind of dumb, or like, oh, that's cool, and like we'll talk about it. And then we put tasks in, and then we involve the producers. But the communication is a lot tighter, and it's a lot more fluid, which has been super cool. So it used to be Valve South, so they're actually attached to Valve. So Chris Ashton, Mike Booth, Phil Robb, they're all working, at Valve, but they were down here in Orange County, and they were helping support like Counter Strike, um, and then they had a cool idea to make Left 4 Dead, so they all started modding Counter Strike. They just like gave a bunch of bots knives and had them attack you, and those became the zombies, and they just kind of went from there, and they kept modding it, modding Counter Strike, and they made Left 4 Dead eventually from that, and Valve published it, but Mike Booth, I think he got picked up from Valve, and they sold Turtle Rock to Chris and Phil, who are now are still our owners after all this time. Um, yeah, so they developed Left 4 Dead together, and then Mike ended up going up. I think he was at Valve, and I'm not sure where he's at now. But.
Yeah, I think he might. Well, I worked under him at Facebook on one of their VR products, so maybe maybe
okay.
that's what he's still doing. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I could speak to. I think the leadership I think can do so much to create an effective culture. I'm curious if there's anything that you've seen from like a management level that somebody can do to like make a big difference in helping the team out.
There's a few things. I think Chris and Phil injected some of the Valve culture where they try to keep things flat for a while. Like kind of everybody's kind of an owner of the product, and I think I mean definitely there's hierarchy obviously at any company, and we definitely have hierarchy at ours, but they definitely make anybody feel included. Like like even our receptionists, people who like our QA guys, like everybody, they all have equal voice and like feedback, which is awesome. We all play test the game together. And I think that's a super important value that every company should value. Like I've heard of companies where they don't even let certain like contract workers and stuff like be at social like parties with them and stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, I think we've read the same article.
yeah, there's stuff like that where it's like, dude, what? Like, but we really try to make it so it's like, dude, everybody's included. We're all invited to company parties. We even give everybody company benefits. There is no contractors at our studio. If you work at our studio, your staff, you get health insurance, you get the whole package. So we really try to make everybody feel included here, which is something that I think those guys, do that helps everybody feel like they're part of the product and not just part of their department. So it's like, if the game sucks, it's kind of on everybody, right? It's like, well, you didn't speak up, man. Like we all have a voice, so we all push to make the product better, which is super cool. Sometimes it can be jarring because you're getting feedback from different directions and trying to like filter out which ones might take priority. Could be hard sometimes, but a lot of it's just discussion and feedback. So it's like if you did hear something and it seemed like an outlier, like this feedback is so different than everything else I've heard, maybe you go talk to that person. Like, oh, well, why'd you feel that way about that? And they might have a really good reason. Like our sample pool is so small. We have like 120 employees. But you think about kicking a game out to millions of people, it's like maybe like 20% of those people feel that way. Like that's a big deal, right? For us, it's like, oh, only 5 people feel that way. But when you kick it out to the mass, audience, it's like, dude, you got to pay attention to those numbers. That's a lot of people actually. So yeah, I think that's a cool cultural thing. Another thing is that Chris and Phil kind of are both down in the trenches with us. They aren't just like dealing with business stuff. They're actually like doing game stuff. Like Phil will still do paint overs and concept. Chris will jump in and help with level design. Like it's really cool. And they're like the owners of the company. For Halloween parties, they like both dress up. They take it super seriously. Like they're just cool guys. So it's definitely something that trickles down at our studio, and like you feel like you're part of something bigger than just yourself and stuff. It's really cool.
What does it mean to be a senior lighting artist?
Sure. I mean, it depends on place. Sometimes that titles can be a little bit arbitrary, I suppose. There are certain expectations that come when you have a senior title. Like you're expected to know which parts of the pipeline your department might affect. When you're rendering a final frame, it's like a lot of stuff comes down to lighting. So as a senior, you're expected to know, all right, well, am I over budget on this? Do I need to, maybe make this static versus stationary or whatever? What should I do with my lights to make these more optimal? And then also collaborating with other departments. Like you should be able to, as a senior, go up to the design or the environment guys and say, hey, you guys have way too much overdraw. This is causing too much, performance hit on this section of the map. Maybe we can replace these trees that have a ton of transparent leaves with a rock, right? Do we need 12 trees or can we do 5 trees and a rock, right? So like being able to communicate those things and understand why it's an issue, I think comes with experience. You should be able to dive into someone's Maya file and say, oh, okay, he's got bad normals here. Maybe the normal map, the green channel needs to be reversed, like stuff like that, where like you have an understanding of the bigger picture and not just like your one small department. Definitely knowing, like how you impact other departments, what departments impact what you're doing. So things like bad modeling, bad texturing, um, and then also having like almost like an art director's eye and being able to address that stuff at a better level where it's you can tell composition might be bad, color palette might be bad, and being able to voice those opinions, right? At our studio, luckily, because it's small, that stuff's a lot easier. I might be able to say, hey, it might be cool if we, mute this background and pop the characters because this is an important moment for the character. Let's push that wall back to gray instead of a bright red, and then the character will suddenly pop. Like being able to have those kind of conversations, I think is a little bit more senior usually. Especially if you want to get into video games, I would say play a lot of video games, see what other people are doing, kind of identify trends. So if you get on an art station, you'll kind of start seeing trends of things where it's like, dude, how many more shader balls can I see? How many more, I don't know, sci-fi corridors can I see? And identify those and think about like, what can I do that's a little bit different that might stand out? If you have a sea of all these similar things, what can you do that is beautiful that might stand out, right? Luckily with like, as a new person, this is the time to get in as an artist because things are so accessible, man. Like you just jump on, you can use all of Megascan's library for free as long as you use it in Unreal Engine. Like you get Unreal Engine for free. So you can jump into a really dope game engine and download a bunch of really dope scans and compose a scene. So there's really no excuse to like not have a good, scene to start with, right? Being okay with throwing away some of your older stuff, right? It's like, oh, I was really married to this because I spent like 20 hours on this piece. It's like, yeah, man, but it looks kind of crappy. It's okay to part with that stuff. Show your new stuff that's better. Join groups. There's groups like on Facebook. There's 80 level. There's like all these different platforms where you can talk to other people and get feedback. It's so open. And what's really cool about this industry is everybody's open to sharing. People are like, hey, this is the process I used. And people are generally really nice. Like if you reach out to them, they'll probably answer your questions and, it's like not a big deal. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, talk to people. Don't just be a big goober and just like, expect everything's going to fall on your lap. There's like no replacement for hard work. Find some cool shots that you like from film or other games. Maybe try to recreate those. Figure and try to digest things, right? Like film and think of stuff, look at the Oscars, right? What are the films that won best cinematography? And then watch those films and break down why. Why do these guys win best cinematography? Why do people think that they had the best camera work and the best lighting out of all the other films that were made that year? That's a good starting point as well. And breaking that down, like what's happening in this frame? Why are they showing off this environment this way? Why are they showing off this guy this way? Why is there a light pole on this mountain? Like all that kind of stuff, right? And break that stuff down and how can I apply that to my work? So it's not just basic. You don't want to be basic because then your work will just get lost in the sea of ArtStation posts. So yeah, try to stand out.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us today. I really appreciate it. And
of course,
yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Nice talking with you, bro.
Key takeaways. Scott had a number of suggestions on how to think about a picture that you're creating. And I kind of was thinking about Lee Petty's 4Fs, and I squeezed his suggestions down into 3 M's. Matter, motive, and mood. Matter. What are you taking a picture of? Motive, why are you taking that picture? And mood, given the picture, how do you want the viewer to feel? Scott very much is guided by sort of the sentiment of the audience, and he's thinking of it constantly with these fresh eye perspectives. He mentions this idea of developer goggles, this idea of after looking at a picture for too long, after playing a game for too many test runs, you just get a whole different perspective than someone who's viewing it for the first time. So he really values that experience of putting yourself, sort of empathizing with that first time experience user and imagining what it's like to see, Thanos crush Vision for the first time. He says that the technical side of being a lighting artist is actually only about 30%. The majority, the other 70%, is really those artistic fundamentals. And that transferring between different technologies, studio to studio, isn't really that difficult. Really, it always comes down to what you learned in art school. With that being said, he says hard work pays off. He constantly sees people who are putting in more time in the office, giving it not just those band-aid quick fix solutions, but who are doing it right, fixing it the way they should from the first pass. He's seeing those people rewarded. He also says that when you're looking for building out your portfolio, you want to identify trends. Not to jump onto them, but to veer away. If you see the same space corridor hallway, then try to make your portfolio stand out by going in a different direction. So that's a pretty interesting suggestion he had there. And one of my favorites was that he has this practice, this little take-home assignment, which is that given your discipline, let's say it's cinematography, go to the Oscars and look up who won Best Cinematography this year and for previous years. Then watch those movies and think critically with respect to why you believe that game or that movie, won Best Cinematography. The whole approach is, let's look at who's winning the awards. What are people lauding? What are they seeing as sort of the cream of the crop for the industry? And then trying to deconstruct it, figuring out, what makes that scene really great lighting? And if I were to light it, how would I have approached this scenario? So I love that take-home assignment, and I think it's something that we could all kind of practice and bring with us into our next adventure. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. And if you want to see more like this, hit subscribe. I'll be coming up very quickly with a video from Hangar 13 and Fallout New Vegas. So look forward to that.